Okay. Good morning, stackers.
Good morning.
That's the way. Good. I hope you all are having great time here in the summit and in beautiful Sydney out here. My name is Sunil Sood, VP IT and Cloud Ericsson. Current engagement, AIC, AT&T's integrated cloud, one of the world's largest OpenStack-based private cloud. So before we start with this discussion here, I'll want to request in the audience to please raise your hands if you are or if you have experience building your own cloud. Great, awesome. As expected, most of us, right? And I know you all will agree with me, building a private cloud, piece of cake, no issues, smooth, great life, yeah? Or should I say, I pity you all guys because I know what it takes. So the panel today has this title because it clearly correlates with the TV show, American TV show in the 80s, the A-Team. And we chose this title because we know every time, every issue which was to be dealt with the A-Team required determination, strong skills, and ingenuity to come out on the top. So just like every issue is faced by the team, we have our A-Team here, who basically is my A-Team from the three great companies, AT&T, NTT, and SK Telecom. So let's start this discussion with having them to introduce themselves, please.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Shintaro Mizuno from NTT, and I work for the R&D division within NTT. So should I go through the implementation or just introduction?
No. Just introduction. Okay. Yeah. There's a lot to talk.
Ahead. Okay, my name is Jae Seok-an from SK Telecom. I'm part of team in SK Telecom to build and develop OpenStack. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I am Alan Meadows. I work at AT&T, and I am a cloud architect.
I would say, how you going, which is an Australian thing to say. My name is Ryan van Veek, and I'm the Assistant Vice President of Cloud Platform Development for AT&T, and lead our team that's building out AIC.
Great. So if we match our story here of building a large-scale, complex, telco-grade cloud, it's not an easy task. We all know that. And every time, all the issues which comes into the picture, it really takes the determination, the strong skills to deal with them, right? So let's talk about these issues. So let me have the panelists here to talk quickly, to summarize on what kind of OpenStack implementation you guys have. Okay. Shintaro?
So my company, NTT, is a group company, consists of very different service areas, providing internet service providers, public cloud service provider, and telecommunication service providers. And they each have different OpenStack deployments. So we have vendor OpenStack deployment. We have like upstream pure OpenStack deployments, and in the box OpenStack. So they're very different OpenStack. But still, we have upstream OpenStack as a core. So we don't change OpenStack, but the architecture is totally different. So those are the, yeah.
So Jay, he's Mr. J of our team. I'm still looking for Mr. T here.
No, again, J or T is similar character. SK Telecom is #1 mobile operator in Korea. And we used to use lots of VMware for our virtualization. But from like 3 or 4 years ago, SK Telecom started adopting OpenStack, starting with dev and QA environment for IT workload. And with successful adoption of that environment, SKT implemented OpenStack to provide infrastructure for our new OSS and BSS system. But we work with the vendor OpenStack. And for the network domain, since SKT has several VNF, and that means we have OpenStack for that VNF. But it's either OpenStack provided by VNF vendor or OpenStack provided by OpenStack vendor. So we're working with multiple vendors, including VNF and OpenStack, to deploy and operate our OpenStack. The problem we are having is since all the OpenStack is kind of silo, and it's different vendor, different version based on when we deploy it. So operating it creates lots of the problems and overhead for our operation team. So SKT started to some effort to standardize our OpenStack, but it's a really difficult task. So we just launched our new journey just to do OpenStack on our own hand, like early this year.
Great. AT&T?
So this is going to mirror a lot of what Jay is saying, but so obviously at AT&T, a lot of people probably saw in the keynote yesterday, very large installation, 80 regions across 10 different countries, and they're all powering mission-critical things. To get down into a description of what's actually happening with a lot of those, we're running across a variety of different hardware. We're running, at some points in time, different versions of OpenStack. And so these configurations, they get complex. We're also, majority of our OpenStack versioning is Kilo, which keeps us a little bit behind in terms of where the community is at. I think that already can sort of send the message on some of the challenges that we deal with. We end up needing to backport things that are critical for us that the community is releasing. And it sort of paves the way for the message that we have, and some of the work that we're doing is we really want to make it easier to fast forward OpenStack versions, to upgrade, to make that less impactful for our tenants, to keep us closer to where the community is at, and that's kind of where we're going.
Yeah, all I'll add to what Alan said is, our cloud implementation, and as we talked about yesterday in the keynote, is heavily focused on us enabling our software-defined networking journey, right? Allowing us as a company to virtualize our network. A challenge there is that that's all new, right?
Yeah.
Moving down that path is you don't have a mature cloud-native workload that you're putting on your cloud platform. So that introduces a number of challenges that we'll talk about here today.
Good. So what are your main pain points, and why are they your pain points? Let's start with Shintaro, please. Okay.
Jay?
No, Shintaro. You are the first in the line. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The major point for us is like testing. OpenStack, as I said, our environment has different requirements and different architectures. So we have to design based on our requirements and test it in that architecture. So we don't know if that feature works in our architecture. It works in DevStack maybe, but it may not work in our architecture. So I have to test it and test it. So testing before deploying is quite challenging for us. As a telco, we have like a level of testing. Like we have to do the failure thing, we have to do the load, and not like cloud native way of testing, but we have to do the telco way of testing. So those thousands of testing code we have to build ourselves and do it ourselves. And that is a big challenge for us. And yeah, another thing for us is a troubleshooting. Since OpenStack is not a single software, it's a system. It consists of various open source, including operating system like DPDK, SRLV. We use them. So troubleshooting OpenStack, well, it's difficult. It doesn't fit within OpenStack itself, but goes beyond OpenStack and have to troubleshoot operating system. So the engineers need to know not only OpenStack, but have to know all the system, including SDN, SDS, and all the things. So those two are the major issues for us.
Good. Mr. J.
And in addition to everything he said, so as I described, we have a silo version, the multiple OpenStacks. So the deploying it is difficult for sure, but we hope that once we have one deployment, like took several weeks to tackle the problem with vendors, then we hope that the next time it will be easier, but it was not. Each deployment has, yeah. So even though there is a small configuration changes to the next deployment, it again took several weeks to deploy it. So I cannot reuse any previous experience, previous automation for the next one. So that was the big issue for us. And also, let's see, and upgrading and even applying a small patch to the environment was difficult. Even though we test in our staging environment, we are not sure it will work in our production because staging and production is not always the same one. So for us, the applying patch is like applying new software entirely. So it has lots of risk. And then troubleshooting. I think troubleshooting should be much easier, regardless of if you use vendor OpenStack or your own OpenStack. I guess OpenStack should provide more better and efficient way to track down problems as a software is there.
Yeah.
So I'll build on both of my counterparts have said here. If I was to talk about the testing, one of the areas, if I take it up a level, security, right, has been a huge challenge for us in terms of testing for security, right? Any enterprise, a basic fundamental is you need to have least privilege, right? And you need to have multiple roles to drive least privilege within your operations teams and across other teams. And so RBAC allows you to do that across the OpenStack projects, but one dimension of that's a challenge is that RBAC implementation of new roles in RBAC it's too complicated. And then second, what we found was it's frankly a science project to try and to test for all of the scenarios that may happen when you roll that out into production. And so we put a lot of effort into implementing RBAC testing through Patrol, which is an OpenStack project, and taking advantage of that set of Tempest tests. Another one would be, to echo the troubleshooting dimension, historically as OpenStack has kind of matured here, when we started our journey, it was all about bringing in a bunch of folks that had a deep DevOps skill set, right, that could jump on bridges and really kind of dig in and try to figure out what's going on. We need to evolve away from that. We need to get to a place where what we ask of our workloads, being that our workloads should be cloud native, we ask the same of our platform. Our platform should onboard some of those same principles and allow our platform to be managed by software entirely. And that's going to require us as a community to focus on, error messaging, health APIs, which there's a forum on this week. We need to allow the system to manage itself. That's the only way that we can scale OpenStack. We can't do 80 plus, 100 plus regions and start to do that with DevOps folks. It just doesn't scale. So we need to put a lot of energy in that space. And then finally, seamless and hitless upgrades, similar to what Jay was talking about, right? It has to be predictable. We can't have a bunch of snowflakes out there in terms of environments that all are unique. We must have a consistent environment. We mustn't allow for configuration drift to take place. And we need to be able to predictably move our code from dev to test to prod and do it every single time exactly the same. And that's been a huge challenge for us, and that's why we've been spending so much time working with our partners here on the container effort that we have in flight.
Thank you. So why is achieving this maturity in general so hard? Why?
I'll start. OpenStack itself has some maturity challenges. I think part of what we're seeing when we look at it is that those challenges aren't necessarily within individual projects so much as it's achieving cross-project goals, right? So when you start to try to solve for some of the maturity issues, whether it's security, whether it's operational simplicity, or upgrade simplicity. Those require intense collaboration and integration across projects. You want those projects to be loosely coupled, but at the same time, unless they work together and unless they allocate capacity in OpenStack releases to work those cross-project issues, they're very hard to solve. It requires a lot of one-on-one lobbying and working individually with individual projects to drive the message. It's very slow, but it doesn't have to be. So that's one reason it's hard. And another reason it's hard, go back to what I said at the beginning, is it's not like the platform is the only thing that needs to do some work in this space. Our workloads do as well, right? So we're doing a lot of work within our company, working with the teams that are onboarding DNFs to help them bring their own test harnesses and deployment automation to the table so that they can quickly onboard to our environment and help us work through problems in driving the entire platform up the maturity curve.
Thank you. Jay?
Well, as Ryan said, OpenStack has so many moving parts from the server, storage, network, even single NIC vendor difference, and on top of that, all the complicated OpenStack software. So the OpenStack community itself has very good gating job, but for us, testing means combination of A and B. So for example, if you have Cinder, you can have multiple plugins from either vendors or from open source storage solutions. And if you combine those two, you are not sure what will happen. Instead of documentation supported, but once you test it, you can find various problems combining those two options. So, I mean, it's testing like all those things is very difficult, and so that's why we don't have so many predictability when we look into OpenStack itself. So that's make us difficult to getting to the maturity we want.
Yep, thank you. Shintaro, you want to add something?
Yeah, exactly as other two just said, OpenStack is a combination of project. It goes like N by N by N by N. You know, Neutron plugin have so many different, variations. Also, Cinder has backend variations. You have to test everything, have like enormous amount of testing. So, and the community doesn't do that, right? So it's up to the users to test themselves. And if something happens, have to go upstream and report the bug, but have to reproduce it in DevStack, right? So, right. And the community used to say, oh, well, it works in DevStack. Probably your architecture design issue. So those like end-to-end integrated testing is lacking within the community, and it's just left to the user. I know it's open community, so the user have to give feedback to the community, but probably community should, as a dev community, should kind of focus in the integration testing to increase the maturity of OpenStack. So.
And there's an opportunity for projects that rely on backends, right, or have a backend plugin structure to put in place criteria or standards with those backends that they expect them to meet. So there's been great progress on projects themselves supporting rolling updates, but the backends that plug into those projects might not have done that work, right? And so unless we work as a community to ask and require those backends, whether it's an SDN, for example, to support that, we won't move up the curve in terms of maturity.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, one more thing is the maturity is not kind of visible to users. So if this API is mature and the other API is not mature, as a user, this project is immature. Right?
All right.
So the level of maturity depends between project, but within the project, between APIs, this API is mature, this is not. So those complexities makes as users to feel that OpenStack is not mature.
Right. And just like in the show, there are issues which come out, and then you're looking for this A team, right? And each character in the A team, every single time it comes up with their special skills, their personalities to come out and resolve the issues. So we know about the issues, so that definitely tells us that you need a strong team. You need those high-performance guys which you need in that team. So what is your approach in building your A team, your high-performance skilled team? Let's start with the AT&T.
Thanks, Sunil. So, on our journey, when we started, the reality was that we didn't have an employee bench that had the skill sets that we needed. So we went out to find some partners that had folks with the right skills to quickly come on board and help us hit the ground running. That said, we did that with a vision in mind that as we evolved, we would try to identify folks both within our company and outside of our company to bring in and start to build an employee core team that could be the strength around which the rest of the team is built. And a challenge for us was it wasn't easy to do that, right? These skills are hard to find. And so what we ended up doing was growing them. And what I mean by that was we tried to find some more senior engineers that we could bring in. We also did a lot of college hiring from universities with folks that had the right type of technical background and the right type of approach to work, brought them in and kind of built teams around those senior engineers, and also augmented those teams with very capable supplier resources as well, so they could learn from those folks. We moved those folks upstream into the community and got them to engage with projects so they could really build their depth very quickly. And through that process, we've built an employee engineering team that's now at the core of our platform. And as we move to the next phase of our evolution, we move to containers, we made a conscious decision there to make sure that all of the thought leaders that were driving that evolution were employees, right? So that, not that our suppliers aren't really important, they are, but it's now an employee-driven program and a supplier-assisted versus a supplier-driven program with employees managing those suppliers. And that's a conscious decision as we move AT&T towards being a software-defined networking company. We need folks with those skill sets in our company.
Mr. J, in SKT.
Okay. So very similar. For the A team, you need to hire good engineers, but difficult there. Since telco is not a famous company, usually developers want to work for because they usually want to go for the gaming or internet company instead of telco. So hiring good engineers is so difficult, competitions and the money. But it's necessary. But since you cannot hire like every bit of the engineer to solve every bit of problem, then we try to make a small, very efficient team and try to make a platform like automation. Or in OpenStack, we say automate everything. But yes, you need to automate everything. So the efficient team can build a good a framework or automations or CI/CD so that other folks easily can address those problems, work on the OpenStack. Then for SKT, we try to make the community upstream developers as part of our team. Since even in TV drama, a team might solve a specific problem, but not world peace. But we want world peace. Our efficient team can solve a problem in the community and contributing back to the community, but also we really want community to be part of our A team. So we are trying so hard to do our work upstream and collaborating with community so that we can get help from community as well. So that was very important strategic approach for us. Absolutely. To build A team.
Shintaro?
Okay. Our journey of OpenStack started like 6 years ago. And first responders to OpenStack were the software engineers, as usual. And they had a skill set. They did the coding. They knew how to deploy. But the numbers of those engineers wasn't big. So there were only a few people really good at OpenStack, but others didn't really know about OpenStack. So internally, it became like user to vendor relation within the company. Like, okay, you're a dev, you fix everything, kind of. So we tried to fix that, and so we had operators, software engineers, and also the supporting team get together and do the same testing and troubleshooting, so that everyone just can share the knowledge and share experiences, so the operators know how dev works. And those kind of team formation changes is the first thing that we did in deploying OpenStack. And the second thing we did is we exchanged human resources between operators and developers. So software engineers who were doing the upstream development went to the operation division and do the actual operations. So, and then he comes back to the dev team so that he knows how operation works, what the requirements from the operators. And based on those knowledge, they can work on upstream. So, like, in Japan, it's not really common to hire engineers from outside, but instead we have to raise within our company. Yep. So we have to do those kind of things within the company to rotate human resources.
And I was going to come to that point, right? So even though you have this team, but we all know with the cloud and OpenStack, there are certain, I would say both advantages and challenges, especially in respect to the team you engage in, right? So Alan, what would you say, how do you manage those things within your teams?
So, we've heard here, some examples of growing those teams out in the community, also growing them in-house, and the difficulties with reaching out and finding them. I'd also point out one other difficulty is that, as OpenStack does become more mature, more adopted over time, I don't think we should expect that to go away. In other words, we might feel that it's difficult to find some of those resources because it's nascent. It's getting a little older now, but at the beginning it was nascent to find those engineers who are well-versed in that. But that's not going to go away because we're starting to evolve other technologies as well. We're starting to also rope in Kubernetes. We're starting to rope in Docker. We're starting to rope in other things to help manage these clouds. And I really firmly believe that the only way to actually manage that in terms of having the in-house skill set to do those things is to grow those internal teams who can keep growing with those other cloud technologies and move forward and have that sort of really now homegrown deep understanding of these things to keep moving forward with the next thing that's going to come along with this whole stack.
Absolutely.
So something I'd add, two things I'd add in terms of advantages of helping build an A team in this space. The community helps in two dimensions. One, with our younger engineers, right, maybe less experienced engineers, they have a really unique opportunity to come to forums like this, to speak to a peer group of very varying experience, right, and skill set, and have their ideas challenged in many cases, right, and learn from that, as well as go listen to others and then go dialogue with them and expand their horizons in terms of understanding of the domain, right? So that's an incredibly powerful thing, I think, for our engineers, because in most big companies, their exposure is from inside the boundaries of that company, right? So they can only learn what from inside their companies. That's a challenge. So this is what's great about working in OpenStack, in open source in general. And then the other dimension in terms of advantages is this is a forum where we can bring companies together that are face similar challenges. So we have a working group called the Large Contributing OpenStack Operators, or ALCU, that we're all members of, which is fantastic because it's an opportunity where we can come together as companies that face similar types of challenges. We can talk about those challenges. We can figure out what we're each doing in that space. If there's collaboration opportunities where we overlap. Also, sometimes where it can be powerful in that you can understand that another company is passionate about a particular area that you're concerned about or have a lot of interest, but you might not have the resource or the time to focus on it right now, right? So just reinforcing the message to them that yes, that is something that we care about too, that we really need, but right now we're focused on this side of things, almost allows us to divide and conquer on solving a larger set of problems, which I think is very powerful.
Absolutely. So we have talked about the issues. We have talked about how to build this team which will resolve these issues and deliver this cloud for them. So let's pivot out and spend some little time on understanding how community can be involved and how community can realize with their continued evolution. What do you think, as in your company, to make community realize and come onto this path?
Okay, so the good thing in OpenStack community is that we have operators committee within OpenStack. It's not only devs, but operators. As Ryan said, we have LCO working group, but also we have Ops Meetup. We have a chance to meet other operators in the community, and we can join forces and have a common issues and do the upstreaming together. One operator can't do everything by themselves. We have lots of issues. We can't do everything by ourselves. But with joint forces, we can achieve more. So leveraging those community opportunities, we could, as an operator, get together and do the common maturity activities too. So that's
good. So Jay, you add something?
I think very similar to what Shintaro said. So in OpenStack, there are already lots of the base stuff. You can collaborate together. So, for example, if it requires multiple project, then you have project management group to write the spec user story and trying to coordinate all the development team in each project to work on those big scenarios, and also Ops Meetup and also user committee. So there are already lots of individual parts in OpenStack, and in some level they're collaborating together. So if as a community we focus more on how we more efficiently communicate together and make synergies out of it, then that will be, that will lead more greater outcomes from the community.
And we heard yesterday in the keynote, AT&T very much emphasizing on the community realization. So what do you have to say?
Yeah, so one of the things that we've been talking a lot with other operators, other suppliers, board members, foundation staff is how do we simplify cross-project integration, right? How do we improve the process in the community for achieving some of those things? How do we formalize a process to enable operators and other users to provide requirements and feedback into the core projects themselves? There's lots of mechanisms for that today, right? There's working groups and there's forums and SIGs, so we're starting to put in place some of these things, but there still isn't a very kind of clear path from, hey, we've got a major problem here, to it's on folks' radar to go work that collaboratively across projects. That's still something we need to work on. And then the one other thing I'd add is, we need to look at how do we measure ourselves, right? So as a community, can we evolve our project measures, right, maturity measures, so that we can baseline where we are today, and we can assess if all the work that we're doing in these various initiatives are moving us up the maturity curve or not, right? Unless you have that baseline and have well understood measures that are adopted across all the core projects, how do you know if you're really moving in the right direction, or if you're just chasing that next new feature that you want to add? And I think that's really important for the longevity of OpenStack.
Very good. Alan, you want to add something?
Yeah, we already mentioned here, I think, a couple of times, maybe introducing things to do some of the same testing with plugins and their various configurations as we're sort of pushing forward with the core. I take it a little bit further what you were just saying, Ryan, and say that in terms of measuring maturity, we need to make sure that we're definitely looking holistically, because a lot on the, let's say, the hitless seamless upgrade path. A lot of great work has been happening in the core. How do we also take that in terms of measuring maturity and also make sure that we're also doing that to all of the other various infrastructure layer things that OpenStack depends on, all the plugins that it depends on, and make sure that we're taking the results of that and making sure that the community is aware that will hopefully help drive some of the behavior. If we know that Neutron plugins X, Y, and Z support being able to do a rolling update, but A, B, and C don't, that sort of just messaging that everyone is aware of will help hopefully drive those various vendors to push those forward.
Great, thank you. So let's say what audience can take away from this panel discussion? Of course, not pizzas and colas, but what do you give as takeaways for the audience out of this discussion?
What did you say?
Okay. So we're a bunch of operators and have common issues. And also, most of you have the common issues as well. So why don't we join forces, right? So operators should join forces and join the community as an operator. So, and we have various chances to make feedback in various locations and places. So join forces.
So a key takeaway for me is, I've been coming to these forums for almost 5 years now, and it's changed. So I used to sit in meetings just like this, or panel discussions just like this, and listen to them. And in those discussions, it was similar theme in that it was, here are all the problems, here are all the issues. But for most of those, there wasn't necessarily an answer or a light at the end of the tunnel. I would say that's different today. I would say today, yes, there are challenges, but I'd say in all of these spaces, there is progress being made. So we don't bring up the challenges just for the sake of, let's just say, complaining about them, right? It's because we want folks to rally around the initiatives that are in flight to solve for some of these things. So I guess my key takeaway is there are a lot of opportunities to help move the needle and drive OpenStack maturity. There's, our team is driving a number of forums this week and some workshops in various areas across security, operational maturity, and hitless and seamless upgrades. And so there's a lot of other similar topics that are going on. So I would just encourage folks to go look at those things and don't shy away from reaching out and actually engaging, whether it's just a little bit of work or a little bit of commitment. Jump in and help work the problem.
Great said. Jay?
They said most of things, but so it's not us like yelling from outside OpenStack about what we need. It's bring ourselves into community, and we said we will work on this problem, but we cannot do by alone. We need like a community support backing our effort or working together. So just let's work together and join that.
Alan, you want to add?
Just a quick comment. I think the point that was already mentioned about the new actor of operating OpenStack being software is a key thing that I think we need to keep in the back of our minds. So when we start thinking about prioritizing those things like health APIs, like those other things, that is a really critical thing to keep moving the needle forward and solve a lot of the challenges that have been with us with OpenStack for a long time, so that we can really take it to the next level.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I think we have a few minutes. If somebody would want to ask any question to the panelists. Oh, Yeah, I see him. Yeah.
You talk about contributing to the community. How much time, when we are already busy trying to maintain and deploy our own clouds, should you commit to the community?
So I'll repeat the question for the sake of the tape. So the question was, when you talk about contributing to the community, and I'm paraphrasing, how much time when you're focused on your own internal development objectives for your cloud should you commit to working upstream, essentially? That's a really great question, because we've kind of evolved on this ourselves, right? Originally, when we started many years ago now, we were literally just taking. We were like, we're going to build this thing. We'll go grab this open source and we'll build something. And then we quickly realized that wasn't the right approach. A big part of that was because we needed to learn, right? And so we needed to get more of our team upstream and into these forums and collaborating and helping to solve some problems that we were facing. And so we kind of pivoted to trying to build an open source team, right, where we dedicated a small team. It wasn't a huge team. Maybe if I was to hazard a guess, 5%, 10% of our total staff that were working in the space was dedicated to working upstream. We've moved away from that now. We're evolving that, because what we found with that was it's a hard job to be working only upstream, but also be grounded in the realities of the day-to-day, right? You need that grounding in order to have the background to make progress upstream. So what we've kind of evolved to is instead of looking at it as, hey, how much time do I need to spend working upstream, when you try to drive your backlog or your product roadmap for your cloud, to think about what's coming upstream and go invest the time in working on those things. And then if you are going to implement something new, start it upstream first. And what I mean by that is, don't go build it yourself and then try to give it away. Actually go work in the community, go find if there's other projects that are trying to work on that might need more help, or at least build a consensus that what's out there isn't solving the problem, and that team agrees that we need something else to go to solve that issue. And then hopefully you can find some folks that are willing to come along for the journey with you. And that's kind of what happened with OpenStack Helm. We started working with Cola. We agreed that that wasn't necessarily going to solve all of the challenges that we needed solved. And so in the forum, that's kind of how we met Jay and team and started working on that with SKT and Intel and NTT was through Cola and other forums, and that was the birth of OpenStack Helm. But that's core to our next generation of AIC, but it's being built 100% upstream. So even though we're working on our internal product roadmap, we're actually doing it upstream first, and so we're just consuming our own efforts. You guys want to add anything?
Yeah, same here. We have a dedicated upstream team. It's software engineers. It's a small team. They work upstream. We have several core reviewers, including Neutron and several other projects. And they're not only doing upstream, but they give support to our operators. They are act as a center of excellence. They answer questions from the operators, and based on that, they do their upstream. So,
absolutely. Any other question? Yeah.
You said you are trying to build your A team by switching your dev guy and your ops guy. What are the challenges of doing that, and what lesson learned out of those switch and you bring back to the community on how people need to think when they build software?
Let me repeat the question. So the question was, Shintaro talked about how they were building their team by swapping roles in terms of dev and ops, and using that to build the experience. What was the second part of that?
Out of those lessons learned, what
are the lessons learned from that experience that we can share back with the community?
Okay, so it's the biggest issue was the mindset changes. Operators doesn't care about the product. They think that it should work. like product from vendors. This API should work. This does work. But if you go to the dev side, you know the background of the open source development and understand why it doesn't work or why it works and why OpenStack is like this. So those mind changes are the biggest challenges for as a person who's coming to the dev side from the ops side. And for the dev side to go into ops side, they really understand what the requirement, why this requirement came from the operators, why they say that they need these features, right? So they didn't understand from the dev side, because as a dev, they didn't understand why the situation in the operation side. They didn't. So the dev people only cares about OpenStack, but for the operators, they have a bunch of other open source softwares working with OpenStack. So you know, the mind shift.
I can add to that. It's actually interesting. We just had something that we worked on at AT&T. Our team is mostly based in St. Louis, Missouri, and in St. Louis there's a technology innovation center called T-Rex that allows startups, other small startup companies, to come together and work in a collaboration space. Our team identified that there was a lot of end-of-life hardware coming out of some of our environments, and we saw it as an opportunity to help build an open source lab inside this incubator in St. Louis. And the opportunity was that, one, we could build this lab and open it up to the community to come and collaborate in a space, so it's both a physical and a physical and a virtual space for collaboration. But it was also an opportunity for our own team of developers to get hands-on experience working with a data center, right? Because a lot of those hires that I mentioned that we brought in out of college, they might have come in as computer science engineers, but they'd never worked in a data center. They didn't have any experience racking and stacking equipment, cabling, switching, power, any of that. So it was a really cool opportunity for us to get those folks engaged, for them to go help build this small data center and learn everything there is to know about the full physical stack. And kind of echoes what you're talking about, which is we didn't swap roles, but we just tried to give folks exposure to those things that weren't just on paper, right, that they got hands-on exposure to.
I think we're out of time. A lot of questions, but you can always reach us. So I thank the panelists very much. Thank you very much.